She's your daughter. Remember that night, human? And now she wants her dad, said the alien woman. The wind on Velrath 7 didn't howl like some mythic spirit. It screamed through broken steel and half-collapsed corridors, because that's what it did here. Stripped insulation, rattled shutters, pushed snow and ruin through the bones of a dead facility. Everything on this abandoned mining world had been left to rot or freeze. No one came back here unless they had no choice. Darian Voss didn't have a choice. He wasn't a soldier or an explorer, just a systems engineer under contract with the Orbital Salvage Authority, tasked with assessing the viability of reactivating long-dead mining stations for scrap reclamation. It was supposed to be a short inspection run. Get in, scan what remained of the old cryo clinic, mark structural failures, confirm drone status, and report. But the floor collapsed under his boots in the main corridor, old supports giving out as they stepped onto a platform riddled with unseen corrosion. His assistant drone went offline the moment it fell. A jagged pipe tore through his side during the drop, and the comm relay was smashed when he hit bottom. Now, with blood soaking through his suit and the temperature dropping by the minute, Darian forced himself upright against a crumbling wall and limped toward a bank of rusted doors. Each breath burned his lungs. The cold was seeping through the jumpsuit. He clutched his side with one hand, the other dragging along frost-covered steel for balance. The thick engineering boots barely kept traction on the ice floor, and his gloves, insulated thermal-sealed, were already stiff. A decommissioned cryo clinic. That's what the blueprints called it. One of the last places on the lower tiers with intact walls. Shelter, maybe, if it wasn't already buried. He pushed one door aside. The hinges screamed. Light from his chest rig swept over shattered medical units. Cryopods cracked open like broken coffins, and frozen air that clung to his skin like grit. But it wasn't empty. Something moved, barely, a tremble at the far corner of the room. His hand went to the shock baton holstered at his belt, reflexive, trained. He stepped closer. The motion sensor on his wrist lit up. Organic. Humanoid. No weapon signature. Then he saw her. She was on the floor, curled at the edge of the light, almost invisible under a pile of torn fabric and frost-covered rags. Her skin was violet, almost blue in the cold, with undertones that shimmered faintly in the emergency lights. She was barefoot. Her legs were bare, knees drawn up close. Her clothing, or what was left of it, was a silk ceremonial garment, clearly not meant for warmth. Slit down the side, sleeveless. Most of her back was exposed to the cold. Her hair was white, not pale blonde, pure white. Long, tangled, and damp from melted frost. It clung to her face and chest, strands frozen at the ends. She didn't look at him. She didn't run. She looked like she had already decided nothing could save her. Darian's breathing slowed, just for a moment. His side screamed with pain, but his instincts shifted. This wasn't a threat. This wasn't some stasis-woken crew member or scavenger waiting to strike. This was something else. He lowered the baton. You alive? No answer. He stepped forward. His vision was narrowing. Blood loss was kicking in. He took another step, and the room tilted. The pain in his side flared sharp and hot, and his legs gave out beneath him. He hit the floor hard, breath knocked out of him. His palms slapped cold steel. He tasted iron in the back of his throat. Then movement. Not fast, not threatening. She crawled to him. Slow, deliberate, shaking. He turned his head, breathing shallow. Her hands hovered before reaching him, hesitating like she expected to be hit. You're hurt, she whispered, voice cracked from disuse. Let me help. She moved to his side, hands trembling as she touched the belt cinched around the wound. She fumbled with it, clearly unfamiliar with the fastening. But she worked fast, driven by something more than training, instinct, survival. Lyrian, she said quietly, without looking at him. My name was Lyrian. Darian, he managed to say. She nodded once, barely emotion. Her hands found a strip of fabric from her own gown and tore it away with her teeth. She pressed the fabric against his side, clumsily, but with urgency. Her fingers were stiff. The way they moved showed she was freezing too, badly. But she kept going. His breath hitched. She was warm. Not much, but enough to register through the cold, saturated air. When she pressed her body alongside his to share heat, he didn't stop her. He couldn't. The cold had already taken hold of his limbs, and she was probably saving his life more than he realized. She kept speaking, softly, tonelessly. I was part of a program. Fertility cast. When my bonded mate died, I was declared non-viable. They reassigned me, but I refused. I was transported here for reassessment. No one ever came back. He understood the implication. Discarded. He also understood what the Varellan fertility cast was known for. Engineered traits. Physical design tailored for reproductive aesthetics. Genetically reinforced docility. Long silences. Controlled empathy. But this woman wasn't passive. Not anymore. You shouldn't help me, he said. I could be dangerous. You're bleeding, she said, and you didn't strike me. That makes you different. The way she said it, quiet, factual, hit harder than anything else in that room. He looked at her again, really looked. The frost at her hairline. The bruises under her collarbone. Her knees scraped from crawling. She had been alone down here. Likely for weeks, maybe months. No one checked these places. No one cared what was left behind. Emergency shelter, East Wing, he said, forcing himself to sit up. Buried, she said. I already checked. You walked around like this? He asked, eyeing her bare feet. She didn't answer. He tried to get up. His legs buckled again. Lyrian caught him, barely. She was thin, too weak to support him fully, but her presence helped him steady. They moved together. Each step was measured. The cryo clinic was falling apart around them, but in the generator subroom, one wall panel was intact. Behind it, an insulated service alcove, maybe 10 meters deep. Small, dark, but sealed. Lyrian cleared it before he could move. She pushed aside loose debris, then crawled in first to test it. Still dry, she said. No wind. It's better. He followed. With her help, he collapsed inside. The air was still. Warmer, barely. She pulled the hatch shut behind them, sealing out the worst of the cold. Inside the dark, she shifted beside him. I'll stay with you until the bleeding stops. He nodded, said nothing. She leaned closer, pressing her chest to his side. The gown offered nothing. Her skin met his through the torn fabric of his jumpsuit. You should sleep, but only when it's safe, she whispered. He didn't answer, but he felt it, the shift. Not just in temperature, in trust. He had walked into a ruin and found someone discarded. Someone the system had used and thrown away. And instead of watching him die, she crawled to him. In silence, they stayed like that. Half strangers, barely surviving, waiting for a night that had no end. The stillness inside the service alcove wasn't comfort. It was survival. The air was thin, stale, but warmer than the corridors. The old insulation held, and for now, the storm couldn't reach them. Darian sat propped against the wall, his back aching, side throbbing beneath the makeshift bandage. Lyrian stayed beside him, close but not touching unless she needed to. Her body was cold, but not as cold as the air outside. Neither spoke for several minutes. Darian's thoughts circled as he watched her in the dim light from his flickering wrist rig. She didn't look away from the door, as if expecting something to break through at any moment. Her shoulders were still tense, and when she breathed, her chest rose too fast, fear masked under stillness. She was clearly trained to suppress reaction, not like a soldier, like someone taught not to flinch until the pain was over. Lyrian, he said finally, voice low, how long have you been down here? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked toward him, then back to the hatch. I don't know, she said. The days blur without light. I counted at first. I stopped when I realized no one was coming. Darian shifted uncomfortably. There were no logs, no alerts. This facility isn't even flagged for occupied assets. They erased it, she said. The transport never filed my arrival. Just another transfer with no record. I was one of 8 brought here. I'm the only one left. His breath caught at that. What happened to the others? They died. Cold. Infection. Some refused food. One walked into the wind. He looked at her again. The way she said it, not emotionally flat, but distant. Like she'd been through the grief already and there wasn't space left for more. They left you here to die, he said. She didn't nod. Didn't need to. Darian's jaw tightened. He felt the sting of it. Not just as an engineer, but as a human being who'd spent the last few years cleaning up after systems that treated lives like broken equipment. This wasn't new, but it never stopped being wrong. Lyrian shifted her legs beneath her, drawing them close again. The fabric of her gown was torn at the thighs, and the skin there was bruised. He noticed for the first time just how bad the damage was. No shoes, no protective lining. Her body had been made for beauty, not durability. She was built to attract, to serve, to breed, not to survive exposure on a dead planet. But she was still here. He reached into his jacket slowly and pulled off one of his thermal gloves. She flinched when he moved, then caught herself and sat still. He extended the glove to her. "Put it on," he said. She looked at it, then at him. Her fingers barely moved. "You'll freeze. I'm bleeding. You need it more." After a moment, she took it, reluctantly, and slid it over one hand. Her fingers curled inside. He could see how long it had been since she'd worn anything warm. "You said you're bonded?" he asked. "What happened?" "My mate died during a transfer. Heart failure. He was supposed to be reassigned, but it happened mid-journey. I was supposed to be reassigned too. I refused." He raised a brow. "That's rare, isn't it?" "Illegal," she said. "For our caste. We don't refuse." He understood. Varellan fertility caste women were designed, biologically and culturally, not to disobey, not to say no. But she had. "You knew what would cost," he said. "Yes." "Then why?" She looked at him fully for the first time. Her pale silver eyes met his. She didn't look fragile in that moment. She looked tired, but alive. And stubborn. "I didn't want to be a vessel again," she said. "I wanted to be left alone. I didn't think they'd send me here." He nodded slowly, absorbing it. "You're not property, Lyrian. To them I was. To me, you're not." That hung between them. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away, either. The rig on Darian's wrist chirped. Low battery warning. He tapped it. The interface flickered, then steadied. He checked the map again. They were one level below the Easterdrome Bay. If any power cells remained, he could use them to jump the sled stashed near the surface access tunnel. If it still existed. If it wasn't buried. If he could walk again without blacking out. "We'll need to move soon," he said. "Slavers might still have bots sweeping these ruins. They don't always check dead zones, but if they scan for heat." She nodded. "I've heard them before. Twice." He blinked. "You hit." "Yes." I pretended I wasn't breathing. "One time, I wasn't sure I was." He took that in. She wasn't just touch-starved or abandoned. She was hunted. Even now, I have a sled near the entrance airlock. If it still runs, we can get to the comm tower, send a distress ping. "What if they intercept it?" she asked. "Then we don't send one. But if we don't try, we both freeze." She was quiet again, then said, "I will go with you." Darian glanced down at her hands, still trembling slightly, but curled into fists now. She wasn't helpless. Just cold, just worn down. But she was choosing now. Choosing to move. To act. "You're strong," he said without thinking. "No," she said softly. "I just remember how it felt to be owned. I don't want to feel that again." They spent the next hour gathering what little strength they could. He handed her his backup jacket, torn, frayed, but warmer than her gown. She wrapped it around herself, visibly relieved. He checked the wound again. It was clotting barely. Enough to move if he didn't push too hard. Then the hatch trembled. Not from wind. A metallic scrape just outside. Darian froze. Lyrian went still, her breath silent. Another scrape. A mechanical hiss. Drone. A scan unit, probably. Ground-based. Maybe residual programming. Maybe something worse. Lyrian reached for him, without thinking, and gripped his hand. Not to be saved. To stay quiet together. To survive. The sound faded. After a long minute, Darian released the breath he'd been holding. Lyrian did the same. "We move at first light," he said. "There's no light down here," she replied. "Then we move when I can stand." She nodded. This time, when she leaned against him to sleep, her hand didn't tremble, and his didn't pull away. Darian opened his eyes to pitch blackness. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then the ache in his side reminded him. He was lying on the cold floor of a narrow utility alcove in an abandoned cryo clinic on Velrath 7. The last fragments of warmth came from the silent, sleeping form next to him. Lyrian. Her breathing was steady, shallow but alive. She hadn't moved. She was curled up beside him, his backup jacket pulled tightly around her small frame. Her head rested near his shoulder, her hair cascading over his arm like pale threads. She didn't stir. The cold hadn't won. Not yet. He tapped his wrist rig. The display blinked once, dim, then faded entirely. Battery gone. No more light, no more scanning. No time left for hesitation. He moved carefully, suppressing a grunt, as pain shot through his ribs. The bandage, if it could still be called that, was soaked through and stiff. He needed proper sealing, disinfectant. Supplies he didn't have. He reached out gently and touched her shoulder. Lyrian, we need to go. Her eyes opened immediately. She didn't startle or panic, just inhaled slowly and sat up, alert and quiet. You're worse, she said. Doesn't matter, he replied. There's a drone bay about 3 levels up. If we can reach it, I might be able to hotwire a power cell for the sled. 3 levels in your condition? She asked, not doubting, just calculating. I won't make it without help. She gave a single nod. Then, without asking, she reached down and took his left arm, pulling it across her shoulders. Her other hand steadied him at the waist, right near the wound. She didn't hesitate now. Not like the first time. They moved slowly through the corridor, avoiding collapsed tiles and exposed coolant pipes. Darian leaned heavily on her, forcing himself to match her pace. She was light, but stronger than she looked. He had no idea how she was still upright with no food, no boots, and days, maybe weeks of exposure. They stopped only once when his legs nearly gave out. She didn't speak. She just tightened her grip and waited until his breath returned. Then kept walking. After 15 minutes, they reached the maintenance stairwell. Most of it had collapsed inward, but one support beam still held a crawl space to the next level. Darian looked up at it, then back down. You sure about this? She met his eyes. Do you want to die down here? No. Then climb. He pushed up first, teeth clenched against the pain. Lyrian followed behind, helping from below when he faltered. She boosted him forward even as her knees scraped raw against broken concrete. They emerged into a wide hallway filled with debris and rusted equipment. The cold here was drier, biting, not smothering. Dust floated in thin rays of light cutting through cracks in the ceiling. A few emergency lights still blinked red down the corridor. Drone bays that way, Darian said, pointing left. They walked in silence. But as they passed a fallen locker, something caught Lyrian's eye. She stopped, crouched down, and pulled a half-torn thermal wrap from beneath the debris. It was small, meant for lining an undersuit. Useless to Darian, but not to her. She looked at him. Permission? He gave her a puzzled glance. I wasn't allowed to take anything before, she said quietly. You don't need permission anymore. She didn't respond. She just folded the wrap and tied it around her feet like makeshift shoes. They pressed on. 2 turns later, the entrance to the drone bay loomed, half buried under wreckage and a half-open blast door. Darian sighed. Doors fused. Lyrian stepped forward and examined the panel. The manual release might still function. She pulled aside the cover, revealing corroded gears. Her fingers were stiff, but her movements were precise. She didn't ask how it worked, just studied it. Darian watched, surprised. You know how to work this? I watched. On my old vessel. I remember things. She gave the lever a jerk. Nothing. Then tried again with both hands. The door groaned and slid open 6 inches. Enough to slip through. Inside the drone bay was a graveyard. Dozens of collapsed chassis, broken crates, and shattered diagnostic tables. Power indicators flickered faintly on a few walls. One service drone lay half-covered in frost, its thoracic cavity open, wiring spilled like tangled roots. Darian limped to it and dropped to his knees. Still got juice, he said. If I can pull the core, it'll jump the sled for half a click. Enough to reach the comms tower. Lyrian stood near the entrance, watching the hallway with her back to him. She didn't fidget, didn't move, just watched. She was calm, but her posture was defensive. He worked quickly, hands numb, vision fuzzy. It took 5 minutes to remove the cell without shorting it. He held it up, breath sharp. Got it. Lyrian turned. We should go. The drone might have been pinged when you pulled it. He didn't ask how she knew. He just believed her. They exited the bay and headed toward the main corridor, where the service ramp would lead them to the upper access. That's when the alarm chirped, one long mechanical tone echoing through the pipe systems overhead. Motion tripwire, Darian muttered. Run. They didn't argue. He slung the power cell into his satchel and leaned on her as they ran, limping, stumbling, ducking under beams. Lyrian didn't speak, didn't stop. Her gown tore more. Her breath grew ragged, but she didn't let go. Behind them, a clatter. Something mechanical had entered the corridor. Not a scan unit. This one walked. A bipedal security drone, old but still armed. Civilian suppression class. Meant to subdue, not kill. But Darian knew better. These things didn't stop if your identity chip failed. They fired first and logged questions into offline archives no one read. Lyrian spun and threw a broken steel rod toward a far corner. The drone's motion sensors tracked the noise and gave them 3 more seconds. Darian shoved the hatch to the service tunnel open. Lyrian dragged him inside. They slammed it shut just as a stun burst exploded behind them, showering the hall with sparks. He panted on the floor. She leaned against the wall, chest rising and falling, hair plastered to her forehead. That was close, he said. She didn't answer right away. Then, finally, she whispered, You would have stayed behind, wouldn't you? If I fell. Darian looked at her. Yes, he said. She nodded slowly. Then she leaned closer and placed one hand against his chest, over his heartbeat. Her fingers were shaking. You shouldn't do that. People like you don't survive long. I've made it this far. That's not a comfort. He didn't move. She pulled her hand back. They sat in silence, only the sound of cooling pipes around them. For now, they had lived. But the price of escape was growing heavier, and trust was no longer a luxury. It was the only thing keeping them moving. The service tunnel sloped upward in a jagged line of old maintenance flooring, rusted cable ducts, and cracked frost-slick panels. It had once carried power conduits and low-voltage comm lines to the upper platform, but now it was just a narrow passage carved between the collapse. The way out. Darian moved slower now. His side ached with every step, and the motion left streaks of blood in his wake. He tried to keep pressure on the wound, but the wrap had come loose during the run. Lyrian walked beside him, one hand on his back, her breath tight with effort. We're close, she said. The air feels thinner. It's a surface tunnel. He nodded, not answering. He couldn't afford to speak. Every inhale burned. When they reached the end of the passage, the access hatch was sealed, partially buried under snow that had blown in through a structural break. Frost covered the manual crank, gears frozen stiff. It wasn't going to budge easily. Lyrian stepped forward. Let me, she said. Darian leaned back against the wall, breath coming shallow. He watched her kneel by the crank, press her hands to the frozen wheel. Her fingers were cracked from cold, her skin pale around the knuckles. Still, she forced it. The mechanism groaned. Metal shrieked. But it moved. Slowly, half a turret time. She put her full weight into it, jaw clenched, feet braced on the grated floor. After a long minute, the hatch gave. Cold daylight, dim and gray, poured in from the outside, blinding after hours in darkness. Velrath 7's surface stretched out in a frozen plain beyond the ruined dome. The atmosphere had thinned years ago, but there was still enough oxygen at low exertion. In the distance, jagged ice cliffs stood like dead monuments, and curling snow squalls drifted in erratic spirals across the landscape. Lyrian pulled the hatch wide and stepped out first. The cold hit like a slap, dry and biting. Her breath left in short clouds. The wind tugged at her hair and the torn blue gown she wore beneath Darian's jacket. But she didn't shiver. Not yet. She turned, reached down, and helped Darian climb out. He grunted with effort, then collapsed to one knee, teeth clenched. The sled was still there. Half buried under a thin layer of snow, 20 meters from the hatch, its rear panel facing them. A compact hover unit, low altitude, exoframe reinforced, meant for short surface hops between towers and docks. He had parked it under a makeshift tarp wedged against a satellite strut days ago. No one else had touched it. He pointed. There. Lyrian glanced back. Can you make it? Only if you help. She didn't hesitate. She looped one of his arms over her shoulders and they moved, slowly, through the snow. Their steps were uneven. The cold tried to cut through the jacket he'd given her, but she ignored it. She focused on him. You said you were a salvage inspector, she said as they walked. Contractor. Freelance. Why did you take this assignment? Velrath. 7 is barely on record. I requested it. She stopped, looking at him. He exhaled hard. Because places like this get erased. Someone has to come back and see what was left behind. You knew there were people like me? No, but I had a feeling. Too many reports missing. Too many unrecoverable files. She stared at him, searching for something in his face. And then, just for a second, her hand tightened around his. They reached the sled. Darian collapsed beside the engine access panel and pulled it open with shaking hands. Lyrian crouched beside him, passing him tools without being asked. He slid the stolen drone cell into the coupler, adjusted the circuit bridge, and snapped the override plug into place. Nothing. He cursed under his breath, then hit it again. A soft hum, then rising power. The sled lifted half a meter off the ground, stable. He slumped back against the hull, relief flooding his expression. Get in, he said. Lyrian hesitated. Where are we going? There's a comms tower 12 kilometers south. Still has a manual relay uplink. If we reach it, I can punch a direct signal to a salvage carrier in orbit. They'll know you picked someone up. I'll deal with that. They might not let you keep me. I'm not leaving you, he said flatly. Her mouth parted, but no words came. She climbed into the sled quietly, taking the rear stabilizer seat. He climbed into the pilot position, wincing as his ribs protested. He activated the NAV map, then looked back at her. Hold tight. The sled rose with a low whine and accelerated over the snow, slow at first, then faster as the repulsor stabilized. Wind cut across their faces, and she leaned forward, wrapping her arms around his chest for warmth. They rode in silence for several minutes. Then, quietly, she asked, What will happen if they find us first? Slavers? Yes. Then I'll do what I have to, and I won't let them take you again. She said nothing, but her head rested against his back, her cheek pressed to his shoulder blade. She hadn't had protection. She hadn't had a voice. Now she had both. They crested a ridge, and the communications tower came into view, faint and spindly against the sky, battered by wind, half collapsed but still standing. Darian felt her arms tighten. They weren't safe yet, but they were moving. And this time, not just to survive, but towards something that might actually matter. The sled slowed as they approached the base of the tower. Its structure leaned slightly to one side, half buried in snow, scaffolding twisted by time and wind. 2 of the solar panels had collapsed inward, shattered glass scattered like brittle leaves across the landing zone. But the main relay dish still held. Barely. Darian brought the sled to a hover, then powered down the drive. The repulsors went silent. The world around them grew still again, just wind, the low groan of shifting ice, and the faint creak of metal above. Lyrian didn't move at first. She sat with her arms still loosely wrapped around his waist, her head resting against his back. When the engines cut, she straightened and climbed out in silence. Her eyes scanned the terrain with caution. You're exposed here, she said. Too visible. We're out of time, he replied, pulling open the relay compartment from the sled supply kit. That drone might have transmitted back. If someone's listening, they already know where we are. He stepped onto the snow, teeth clenched against the pane, and limped toward the tower. The side access hatch was half open, held in place by frozen cables. Lyrian stayed close, watching every movement around them, body tense, eyes sharp. They reached the entrance. Darian braced himself against the wall and pried the hatch wider. It gave with a rusty grind. Inside, The tower's control room was intact, but barely. One terminal had power, flickering dimly. A cracked chair lay on its side beside a discarded EVA pack and a thermal blanket, moldy from condensation. Lyrian followed him in, stepping carefully. Her bare feet, now wrapped with salvage cloth and thermoplastic strips from the sled, made no sound. She moved with the quiet wariness of someone who'd survived too long in places that killed others. Darian collapsed into the chair, pulled the terminal closer, and connected the drone cell to the emergency port. The screen stuttered once, then stabilized. Command input required. No satellite uplink available. Local beacon only. He frowned. The main dish is off alignment. We're not getting orbital. Can you fix it? I can rotate the dish manually, he said. But I'll need to go up. She turned sharply. No, you'll die on the climb. He looked up through the cracked window at the ladder bolted to the inner tower frame. It rose at least 20 meters, exposed to open sky through torn siding. She saw his hesitation. I'll do it. You don't have a clearance. The override only responds to, teach me what to press. He stared at her, then pulled out the portable relay pad from his satchel and activated the manual override sequence. He showed her the steps one by one. Press these keys. Rotate the dial to this bearing. Wait for confirmation light. You'll see red, then green. You get green, you come back. Immediately. She nodded once, memorizing it. Before she turned to leave, he caught her wrist. Be careful. For the first time, she smiled, faint, unsure, but it was real. Then she climbed. Darian watched her from the base of the tower through the cracked window. The wind battered the frame, tugging at her white hair. She moved steadily, gripping the rungs with frostbitten fingers, legs shivering in the cold. The borrowed jacket was too large for her. The silk underneath flapped in strips behind her like shredded cloth. She looked like she didn't belong in this place. But she did. She had survived worse. Halfway up, the wind caught her hard. She paused, held on, eyes squeezed shut. Then she climbed again. Darian's gut twisted as he watched. He'd come to this dead world to check data, to file salvage claims. He didn't expect to find someone like her. And now, every second she climbed that tower, he realized something quietly, irreversibly clear. He didn't want to lose her. Then, the dish moved. He saw the panel on the console flash. Realignment in progress. He exhaled, shoulders sinking with relief. Minutes later, Lyrian returned, shaking, windburn on her cheeks. Her hands were raw, scraped, trembling from the cold. She collapsed into the chair beside him without a word. It worked, he said. Signals bouncing through the regional net. Emergency code flagged. If anyone's within reach. The console blinked. Unknown incoming vessel. Non-registered ID. No response beacon. Darian froze. Lyrian sat up straighter. That's not rescue. No, he said. That's a slaver ship. Her face didn't change. She simply looked at him. What do we do? He stood slowly, pain flaring in his side. We don't stay. They ran back to the sled. Darian plugged in the relay data and overrode the safeties. The sled powered to life. Lyrian, he said as she climbed in, if they catch us, they'll scan you. See what you are. I know. I've registered you as a declared companion under Contractor Clause 1A. It's a false entry. If they challenge it, I'll lie, she said, if it helps. He looked at her. I didn't bring you with me because I needed a lie. I brought you because you chose to live. And she leaned forward and kissed him. Not out of fear, not as payment. Just once silent, cold lips brushing his. I chose you, she whispered. You didn't ask, but you gave me the choice. He blinked, breath caught in his throat. Then he accelerated the sled, aiming west toward the storm wall, away from the beacon, away from the incoming ship, and toward the edge of old safe zones that hadn't been scanned in years. Behind them, the signal kept blinking. But ahead, there was still space to run. And maybe, just maybe, space to begin again. The sled cut across the snow like a knife through frost. Its low hum fought against the howling wind, engines straining as Darian pushed the throttle harder than the design ever intended. The pale sky of Velrath, 7 blurred around them, gray clouds racing overhead, ice cliffs warping into ghostly shapes as they tore through the ravine. Behind them, in the distant sky, the slaver ship appeared, a black speck growing fast. Sleek, angular, no markings, no transponder, designed to disappear. "They're gaining," Lyrian said, leaning forward from the rear seat, her voice steady despite the wind tearing at her hair. "I know." Darian's vision swam. His side burned where the wrap had split again, but he kept his grip on the controls. Blood was soaking into the seat, but he ignored it. Pain didn't matter. Only speed. "The terrain's changing ahead," Lyrian said, scanning the jagged cliffs rising in the distance. "You can't outrun them in a straight line. There's a quarry grid to the west, old mineral shafts and drop tunnels. Might lose them in the dust fields. Then go." He turned the sled hard left. Ice shattered beneath them. The engine whined in protest, but the vehicle responded, banking toward the broken horizon. The slaver ship followed. No warning shots. No comms hail. They weren't interested in negotiation. They were here to collect product. Lyrian gripped the side rail, her eyes locked on the sky. Her breath came faster, but her posture remained rigid. Not frozen with fear, bracing herself. Choosing to stay beside him, even now. "Do you trust me?" she asked suddenly. Darian's knuckles tightened on the sled controls. "Yes." "Then when I tell you to jump, you jump. Understand?" He glanced back. "You're not sacrificing yourself." "I'm not. I'm giving us a chance." He looked in her eyes. There was no panic there, just clarity. Focus. She wasn't the same woman he'd found in the corner of that cryo clinic. She had made a choice, and she was still making it. He nodded once. "When?" "Soon." The quarry appeared ahead, an enormous pit carved into the side of a collapsed mountain, long since abandoned. Machinery still jutted out of the ice like skeletons. Wind kicked up fine gray dust from the tunnels below. Lyrian grabbed the flare stick from the sled's emergency panel, twisted the cap, and ignited it. Bright crimson smoke poured from it instantly. She hurled it into the snow behind them. The slaver ship dropped altitude, drawn to the heat signature. "Now," she shouted. Darian turned the sled sharply, then killed the stabilizers. The vehicle pitched sideways, slammed into a snowbank, and slid to a halt in a hollow of crushed rock. Darian hit the release and fell out, grunting from the impact. Lyrian was already pulling him toward the nearby crevice, a narrow slit of darkness between 2 jagged cliff faces. The sled exploded seconds later. A plasma burst from the slaver ship obliterated the flare, and the sled with it. Smoke and ash bloomed into the air. Sensors would read it as a kill. They crouched together in the crack, breath frozen, hearts hammering. Then silence. The ship hovered for a long moment over the burning wreck. Then it turned and left. Only then did Darian speak. "You just got us killed on record." Her lips curved slightly. "Good." They sat there for another minute before he collapsed fully against the rock wall, his breath shallow. "You're bleeding again," she said, kneeling beside him. "It'll stop." "No, it won't." She peeled away the soaked bandage with careful fingers, examining the wound. Her hands moved gently, more sure than before. She no longer flinched when she touched him. No hesitation, just care. "I'm not a doctor," she said, "but I know how to keep someone alive. I learned from watching, from tending others, before I was discarded." He didn't speak, just watched her. She met his eyes. "I want to help, not because I have to, because I need you to live." She finished the wrap, then sat beside him. Her shoulder pressed lightly to his. Minutes passed. No more pursuit. No more alarms. Only the sound of wind against rock. Then she turned to him. "You asked before why I refused reassignment," she said. "You assumed it was grief. It wasn't." Darian looked at her, waiting. "I didn't want to be touched again by hands that saw me as a resource. I didn't want to feel nothing while someone took from me." "And now?" he asked. She reached up and placed his hand on her chest, just above her heart. Warm, steady, real. "I'm not afraid of your hands," she said. "And I'm not broken." Her other hand slid to his cheek. "I want to feel something real, even if it's brief, even if the cold takes us tomorrow. Darian didn't speak. He didn't need to. He leaned into her touch, slowly, carefully. And when he kissed her, quietly, gently, it wasn't about saving her. It was about choosing her. They stayed curled together in that crevice as night crept across the icy planet. No ship, no sled, no plan. Just warmth, shared willingly. For the first time since either of them had been left behind, neither felt alone. And for the first time, neither wanted to run. Dawn came slowly on Velrath 7. The light was thin, diffused by gray clouds and frost haze. Snow drifted softly across the broken quarry, layering silence over the wreckage. Inside the crevice, Darian stirred. He opened his eyes to warmth, rare and unfamiliar. Lyrian lay curled against his side, one arm draped lightly over his chest. Her breath was slow, steady. She was still asleep, hair tangled across his shoulder, the ends stiff with frost. Her skin, though chilled, radiated life. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he exhaled, careful not to wake her, and looked toward the sky. No ship, no sound, just the quiet before something changed. His ribs ached. The bleeding had slowed. He could still feel the pulse of pain in his side, but it no longer clouded his mind. What remained now was clarity and a question. Was anyone coming? He gently slid out from beneath her, propped himself up, and activated the wrist rig one final time using the cell's remaining charge. The signal from a comm tower had gone out before the flare trap. A timed message, set to loop. If anyone received it, they'd know it was no accident. He limped out of the crevice and scanned the sky. Still nothing. But then movement. A shimmer, low on the horizon. Dust pushed outward in a low arc, subtle but visible against the ridge. A shape emerged, boxy, industrial, unmarked but not slaver tech. No sharp angles, no stealth shielding. Civilian class. It slowed, touched down carefully 50 meters from the quarry edge. Lyrian stepped beside him, her eyes fixed on the ship. Her face was unreadable. "You think it's safe?" she asked. "No idea," Darian said. "But it's not theirs." A ramp lowered. Two figures stepped out. Enviro suits, no weapons drawn. One of them scanned the area, then approached. "Darian Voss?" The voice came through a speaker, distorted but calm. He nodded. "You sent a salvage beacon from the Velrath Tower. It flagged a distress override with life signatures." "That's right. We weren't expecting survivors. But someone's flagged your signal for review." Darian's jaw tightened. "Oh, doesn't say. Just a blank authorization. You went off this rock. We got one spare cabin. You'll have to vouch for her." The other figure looked at Lyrian with a glance too long. "She with you?" the crewman asked. Darian nodded. "She's not cargo. She's not registered. But she's with me." There was a pause. Then, "We don't ask questions out here. Just sit tight. Departure in 10. The crewman turned back toward the ship. Lyrian didn't follow immediately. She looked up at Darian, wind stirring her hair. "If I go with you," she said, "they'll know what I am. Then we won't let them define you by it." She looked away, the old hesitation flickering for just a moment. Then she took his hand. "I don't want to be erased again," she said. "If I'm leaving this place, I need it to mean something." He squeezed her fingers. "It does," he said, "and you don't have to belong to anyone." She met his eyes. "Except you." He started to speak, then stopped. She added, quieter, "Because I choose to." Then she leaned in, pressed her lips to his forehead, and whispered, "Let's go." They boarded the ship together. No chains, no records, no reassignment orders. Just two names on a manifest, bound for a distant orbital way station. Darian gave her his cabin. He took the floor. She let him for now. Later, when they reached orbit, she stood by the window and stared out at stars she never expected to see again. He stepped beside her. "What do you want to do next?" he asked. She thought for a long time. Then, "I want to sleep beside someone, and no, I won't be touched unless I ask. I want to choose what I wear. I want to learn how to fix things like you." He smiled faintly. "I think we can arrange all of that." She nodded, then added, "And I want to stop running." Darian placed a hand on her back, Gentle, steady. You already have. She leaned into him fully, completely, and said nothing else. Outside, the station lights blinked like stars, finding their rhythm again. And inside, in the quiet of that cabin, a woman who had once been bred to serve laid down in her own bed. Because this time, she wasn't property. She was home.